Hey, welcome to the RocketMSP podcast, the show where we ask the tough questions. I'm Steve Taylor, your host. Jim, how are you, sir?
Steve, I'm doing fantastic.
Thanks
awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, I love having you on the show, man. SaaS Alerts, I've been a big fan of what you guys are doing over there since the beginning, and now I like look for reasons to have you on. So now that I know you've got this annual SASI report that comes out, I thought, what better reason to have you come on than to talk about the state of cybersecurity from what you're seeing through your own platform?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. I love coming on the show. So the feeling's mutual there. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to catch up and see what's going on from a real data perspective. One of the things that we talk about the SASI report, and that for those that don't know, SASI stands for SaaS Application Security Insights. It's real data. We're not doing surveys of CTOs or CISOs and trying to figure out, what they say they use or what they want to use. This is real life data from our platform from all of last year that we've aggregated and anonymized and put in a consumable format for our MSPs to take to their customers. We've specifically designed this this report, I should say, so the average MSP can look at it and bring the information in the report to their customers to highlight what's actually going on from at least on the SaaS cyber side.
Well, very cool. You wanna just dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. So do you have any questions before I kind of have a deck prepared that gives some of the highlights of the report, but if you have any questions out of the gate, Steve, I'll be happy to take them now.
No, I think I'll have questions once we start diving into some of this data, though.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so first of all, one of the things that we like to do at SaaS Alerts, whether it's an internal meeting, still to this day we do this, or obviously external, we want to make sure that people know why we exist as an organization. And we believe that there's a transition underway in cybersecurity from an on-premise and device-centric focus to a user behavior and account-centric approach. And SaaS Alerts helps MSPs win on this transition. That's why we exist. And it's one of the reasons why we put this report together. So we'll dig in, we can go over, obviously, the insights from the report from a high level. We can touch on a little bit about the evolution of the SaaS application threats and what we see out there. And then we can just dive into questions, anything you have.
Great.
So on the report itself, so again, we've aggregated all of the data that we had from last year. So this is 2023's data, and it stopped in December 31st. So that's the cutoff, December 31st, 2023. We had 907 MSP partners in the platform. That accounted for nearly 2 million end user accounts. This report accounts for nearly 19,000 SMBs monitored. So those 907 MSPs, essentially they're bringing to the table about 19,000 of their customers. We logged about 2.7 million events last year. 2.7 billion events last year. And which is a lot of data, obviously. And people might ask, well, okay, what are the size customers? You've got nearly 19,000 SMBs on this, but what's the average customer? We can tell you it ranges from one user all the way up to 153,000 users. So it's a really big range. I mean, obviously that 153,000 user company, that's a big enterprise, but majority of the customers are in that 30, 40, 50 user range, which you might expect from most MSPs. So it's a lot of data. I just want a baseline, essentially, where everything is coming from and why it looks the way it does.
Okay.
So one of the first things that we look at, Steve, is where are the threats coming from? So we can see here, these are the countries that the threat actors are trying to get in the most. They're not necessarily getting in the most from here. We're going to go through that in the next slide. But these are where majority of the attacks are coming from.
I find it fascinating that none of the Middle Eastern countries are on this list here. I'm sure they are, but they didn't make the top 5.
Correct.
And yet there's still all of this buzz around the Middle East with a lot of people here in America.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that you should, we'll get into this too a little bit, but threat actors have done a really good job disguising where they're coming from.
That's true.
Right. So someone can look like they're coming from China or Russia, but they're actually in Pakistan, for example, or Iran. Like, it doesn't, the geolocation stuff is becoming less and less significant as time goes on here. But it's important because, at least to illustrate to your customers, hey, look, there are people from foreign lands that are trying to gain access to your information. So, so this is where the attacks are coming from that get in the most, so they're most successful. So it's interesting that China by far tries the most, but they're not on this list of threat actors from countries that actually are successful.
Yeah, Germany and Spain, like, what the heck's up with that?
I know. It's, we're just going where the data takes us. But again, we don't know necessarily if people are setting up, VPNs and, kind of spoofing their locations. So, but this is, again, where the most successful threat actors, or at least you're getting in from, or say they're getting in from. So then we go to the lowest severity events. For those that are not familiar with the platform, essentially what SaaS Alerts does is it filters through those 2.7 billion events every year. And this year it'll be closer to 9 billion events.
Oh, wow.
We filter through all of it, and we only highlight to the MSP what they have to act on behalf of their customer. So this is a low severity event. So this would not show up in the form of an alert. But we collect it and make sure it's there, because when we do correlations, some of this information can be helpful in terms of identifying specific threats and definitely patterns. We've incorporated a lot of machine learning into SaaS Alerts. So every piece of data helps us in terms of being able to identify threats as they become real threats. And sometimes it's little pieces of data that can, help us essentially determine whether or not a threat is viable. So in this case, we've got low severity events. Our alerts, file event opened, IAM event, so OAuth access from a foreign application, and then a file event modified. Nothing, crazy here, nothing crazy to look at, but wanted to highlight it. This will be the list of the top 3 medium severity alerts, and this is where something would rise to notification status, alert status. So if you're, in our UI, you're going to see it pop up as something you should do something with, or if you have us connected into one, your PSA, then it's going to come up in the form of an actionable alert. And this is where we see, download limit exceeded. And you have the ability in our platform to basically determine what those thresholds should be down to the individual. But in this case, over 37% of the time, or excuse me, the medium severity event, right? 37.4% of the time here would be the highest level medium alert that we're going to see. Upload limit exceeded, and then account locked. And a lot of people ignore account locks, but again, it's a piece of the puzzle that we use to determine whether or not something else, another piece of information coupled with 2 or 3 pieces of data could actually be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So then we look at the top 3 critical alerts. We look at, outside approved location is by far, people logging in from someplace they shouldn't be, or a threat actor coming in from a place they shouldn't be. That's unrecognizable to us. A file opened from an outside approved location, and then someone's downloaded information from an outside approved location. So those are going to be your top 3 critical alerts. And we currently monitor over 290 different events, just so people know.
That's great. Now, you mentioned that you can correlate this data. So while look, can we go back to the medium alerts?
Yeah.
So while file download limit exceeded could just be that somebody's downloaded too many darn files.
Right.
It's helpful for that way you can correlate that with, hey, I had a successful login from India. I see file downloaded limit exceeded. And then I'm sure you can also look in the logs to see what user or what session is doing the downloading too.
Definitely. 100%.
Okay.
Yep. And we have, respond rules that are set up in the platform. So it's an unlimited rules engine. It's got limitless different variables that you can essentially put together to create an automated response. And we'll get into it in another slide, but I can tell you that last year, people using our respond module and the rules they put together, we've caught over 7,900 incidents of compromise. Most of them last year were token hijacking, business email compromise. We caught those within 5 to 15 minutes of the attack through the automated remediation. And that's coming back to your question about data correlation, right? And you can do that down, to the organization or the user, which it makes it really powerful because, you could be in a situation where you're an MSP, your customer. And if a CFO, for example, just of course their natural everyday business, they're downloading excessive amounts of data for, shareholder meetings, or, they're compiling a lot of data for end of year reporting. That's just a normal part of their job. You could set the threshold for that specific user be much higher than, the sales rep at the other end of the hallway.
Okay.
So that brings us to the applications driving most of the events. So,
well, this shouldn't be a surprise.
No, it's not. Look, most MSPs care most about 365 because all of their customers are on it for the most part. So you see a lot of traffic for 365, right? But we also see a lot of traffic for Google Workspace. And what's important to know is the ratio here. So we're accounting for the volume by just looking at the ratio. We look at the total number of events monitored, what they mean from a critical standpoint, like how many of those actual monitored events turn into critical alerts, and then we create the ratio. So, even though there's a ton of events on 365, it's, 1.3% of the time an event thrown off from Microsoft is going to generate a critical alert.
Now, with Slack being so high of a ratio, is that simply because maybe they're not as verbose as the other platforms?
When you say verbose, what do you mean specifically?
They're not creating events for every little thing that happens, maybe, while Microsoft is logging every transaction, whether they're critical or not. Maybe Slack is slacking when it comes to reporting, and maybe they get rid of all the low alerts.
That's your job. Like, you can do the configuration through the platform, right? So you can determine what's high and what's low, but ultimately, again, this is a ratio. So I think a lot of people take for granted, and we use Slack here at SaaS Alerts internally. I think what people take for granted is there's a ton of file sharing that happens through Slack. It's not just, basically a messenger, like, IM or whatever. It's not more what AOL used to be. Remember all that AOL instant messaging stuff that we used to do 20 years ago? People, I think, if they're thinking that's all that Slack does, they don't fully understand everything that's happening within inside Slack. And I think that ultimately there's a ton of file sharing that happens that isn't being accounted for, there's not enough precautions around how that data is handled inside of Slack.
Okay.
So, but, Salesforce, is right in line with, I was thinking, the rest of them. That one actually came down from last year a little bit. It was Salesforce was higher last year, ratio wise. So you can see now the applications driving the most events and alerts and the respective ratios. So one of the things I mentioned before is how in 2023 we were able to, using our Respond module, stop about 7,900 potential breaches within 5 to 15 minutes using the automated remediation piece. One of the things that, this isn't our data, this is IBM's data. It takes on average about 228 days to detect a breach, and another 80 days to contain it once it's been detected. Again, that's not our data, but this is why it's so important to make sure that you have the monitoring in place and the remediation, what we think should be automated, in place to stop these breaches before they have any time to do any real damage. 228 days in an environment, that's an eternity. And all the things they can do, monitor your organization, monitor your customers' organizations, right? Like, and sometimes threat actors are super patient. They will get into one business with their eyes on getting actually into another business that's downstream, because they know that, company A does business with company B, but company B is the one they really want to get into. But the shorter you can condense this time frame, obviously, the better off you are in protecting your customers.
Well, kudos to you guys for stopping so many potential breaches so quickly.
Thank you very much. And, this was basically, we now have about 85% of our partners that are on Respond. Last year, that number wasn't nearly as high. So, throughout the first half of the year, at least. So I would say about, 50 to 60% ramping up to the 85%. So this year in 2024, when we report this data this time next year for 2024, that number should be a lot higher.
That's awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. So, Steve, one of the things that we did this past year was we built 3 configuration management into the platform for 365. So this essentially, just so people know from a context perspective, what we do is when an MSP's customer comes on, they can baseline where their score is now based on their license type. So this gives us a lot of really great data and also helps the MSP save a ton of time. Instead of going through tenant by tenant by tenant, securing, bringing them up to the highest score possible, and then monitoring the drift associated with that, like they just don't have the resources to be able to do that. So that's why we built what we call Fortify into the platform, which does the 365 configuration management. So based on that, the highest Microsoft score we've seen to date is a 96.
That's pretty impressive.
It is impressive. It is. And we have a number of MSSPs that are on this platform, and they do a really, really great job. So more than 100 scores increased by 50% or more. And that's only since August. So we released this in August. And so this is basically half year's data, not even. And then the top 10 MSP users that have put this across the board have increased secure scores of their 233 customers by an average of almost 36 points. So if someone's coming in at a 40, there's a really good chance by using this and leveraging the recommended actions in Fortify, you can get your customer up to a 76. 40 to a 76, it's a pretty good jump, and you're demonstrating a lot of value to your customer that way.
Again, impressive numbers.
So what's going to be, this is constantly evolving. We just came out with templates for this, automated templates for making the lives of MSPs that much easier. But we're going to be coming up with what we call a Fortify score, which is going to be a lot more inclusive of other data points. And I won't go too far into it because there's still a lot to be done there. But it's really exciting. What I think we're going to be able to accomplish and what we can share this time next year, Steve, is going to be pretty awesome.
Good.
So then we kind of come into the threat vectors, right? Like one of the things that disappointed me the most from this year was the lack of adoption in MFA. So I can tell you last year's report, the number of end user accounts that were using MFA was 32%. So even after all we as an industry we've seen over the last year and how much we tell all of our customers how important it is to use MFA, we only saw a 3% uplift.
That is, can I just say, MSPs, come on.
Yeah.
All of your clients should have MFA by now.
I would agree. I mean, at this point, it's like, driving a car without a seatbelt. I mean, we all know the dangers, right? So I don't know why this is so difficult, but it is what it is. The data is what it is. It's consistent with other data points we've seen across the industry. And I think this is just an area that we all have to get better at.
And excuse me, I'll tell you what it is. MSPs are afraid of getting pushback from their clients. They're afraid that if I tell my client you have to use MFA, they're going to be upset and they're going to fire me and look for somebody else who doesn't make them have to do that.
Right.
And the problem with that thinking is, if you're that afraid of your customer firing you for providing them good security, then it doesn't sound like you're educating them correctly about security.
I would say that's a very fair point. Yeah, for sure. So, look, again, hopefully the score goes up a lot more next year. I'm optimistic that hopefully that will happen, but time will tell. So this is another piece, unlimited guest user accounts. So unmonitored guest user accounts. We built in specific functionality into a platform that helps MSPs manage guest user accounts, because if you listen to Microsoft's own best practices, what they will tell you is that you should be going in every single month and deleting any guest user accounts that haven't logged in. Does that happen? Not really.
Right.
They just sit out there and they sit out there and they sit out there. One thing that we allow people to do in bulk is essentially block sign in, which solves the problem, by the way. And we saw a big improvement there this year, but there's still a lot of accounts that are out there that should be deleted. So that's what this is highlighting here. And then SaaS to SaaS app integrations. So our co-founder and CTO, Chip Buck, loves this slide for some reason. He's just, I guess, a geek at heart. But it does give you some insight into how MSP customers operate, right? So even though folks are using 365, there's a ton of Mac users out there. That's what this is telling us right now, which is interesting. And then I think the Google Workspace stuff tells us that there's a lot of folks using Google Workspace in the education, K through 12. So just kind of interesting takeaways here.
Yeah.
You surprised by any of this, Steve?
Not really.
Are you a Mac guy?
I am. I'm gonna say I'm not just a Mac guy. I'm an Apple fanboy.
Okay. Obviously, you're not the only one.
Sure.
Because this data tells us that there's a lot of people using Macs, but 365 in terms of the productivity app.
Yeah.
So
I gotta say, last night I went down the rabbit hole and I was looking up all the different Google stuff. I was looking at like Google Nest and wondering, what would it be like if I started integrating the Google Home ecosystem into my next place, because we're building a house. So
nice.
And then I started looking at all the Android stuff, and I'm like, man, it's just so pretty.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, maybe in a month or 2 months or whenever the next WWDC is, because I always download the latest and greatest iOS. So
yeah.
maybe they'll refresh it and it'll be pretty and I'll love it again.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. We had Nest, and then we took it out for something else, and I think Nest was better.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm a big fan of the Ring.
Yeah.
System. So
yeah, so am I. So
I love that story, how that guy was on Shark Tank and he didn't get a deal. And now he's on Shark Tank as a shark. That is awesome. I love that.
See, I haven't watched Shark Tank in so long that I didn't realize we have, like, I should have realized, but I didn't realize we have new sharks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I guess it'll happen eventually. But
Yeah, exactly. And then, the core, the way they do it seemingly now is like they always have the core folks, and then they'll kind of rotate in one of the ones, like the guy from Kind and Gwyneth Paltrow and like the guy from Ring and stuff like that. They just kind of rotate. But we digress. Risky file behavior. So you can see here, close to 70 million file shares last year. It's over 8,000 per hour.
That is a lot of file shares.
It is. One of the things I always say about SaaS applications, one of the things that's great about them is that it's really easy to share information. One of the things that's bad about them is that it's really easy to share information.
Yep.
And in a cybersecurity realm, that can be dangerous when end users aren't paying attention and doing the right things. So you can see here, most the file shares are mostly internal, going back and forth.
That's good.
We got within the same company, but still a fair amount, 37% are external. And too many people are still making file shares anonymous without end dates, which means they just kind of float out in the ether. We call them orphan links. So definitely takeaway, make sure that people are setting those up to specific people with a specific end date. So this is a file sharing stuff. So the threats that we're watching really closely, because they've made phishing now so easy. You can just go out and literally just buy a kit, and they bypass MFA. They come pre-populated with emails that you can go attack. IP filtering, integration with Telegram bots. It's scary how easy they make. It's like paint by numbers at this point if you want to be a threat actor. So obviously that's a concern. IP address localization, which is what we were talking about when we, the first couple of slides, we were talking about geolocation. The criminals now or bad actors can evade things like impossible travel by essentially, masking where they're coming from. And then token hijacking. This is the one that I think is the most scary. And I can tell you that almost every single MSP that we talk to, whether they're an existing partner or a new prospect, they're seeing token hijacking happen in their client base all the time. It's pervasive at this point. And the big reasons that bypass MFA and conditional access policies. And we don't have to get in the weeds on this. We've done a lot of presentations on token hijacking, how it works, how easy it is. And you can look up webinars online and stuff that we've done on it. Our co-founder, CTO, Chip, has worked with Ben literally live at Run a Boom. They showed essentially the anatomy, if you will, of a token hijacking right on stage. They did one where Ben Jones got into Chip's account. So this is one, again, you can prevent it, but you have to have everything in place to do it. And it really comes down to being able to identify all of the behaviors and then immediately act on it. So we believe that timely detection and response are critical when it comes to everything, right? And we just, as awesome as humans are, they just can't keep up anymore. So we need to have tools in place that are going to combat the machine learning and AI functionality that the bad actors are using. So first, we talked about, you got to enable and enforce MFA. When possible, definitely use conditional access rules for 365. Proactively and consistently train your end users. And there's a lot of great companies out there that do security awareness training. That's definitely a big piece of this. Monitor all the major SaaS productivity applications for unusual behavior, like we've been seeing, right? The track the file sharing activity. And this is going to prevent internal threats too. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, but we see quite a bit. Monitor those OAuth logins. And then, like we talked about, follow those Microsoft best practices. Go in and delete those unnecessary guest user accounts. This is, if you can follow this list from a hygiene perspective, you're going to put yourself and your customers in a much better position. So those are some of the highlights and takeaways from the 2024 SaaS Alerts SASI report. So hopefully, Steve, you found this educational, and your audience will too. And certainly, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Absolutely. I have tons of questions. Obviously, cybersecurity is one of those things. I mean, we saw it. What was it? 63% or something like that of end users aren't using MFA.
Mm-hmm.
So how can MSPs effectively communicate the importance of investing in SaaS security to their clients, especially in light of the increasing sophistication of attacks like token harvesting and phishing as a service?
Right. So I think at this point, we've been at the MFA game for so long. We need to keep pushing it, but also to a certain extent, resign ourselves to the fact that maybe some people aren't going to adopt it. In that situation, we have to say, okay, how can we protect them from themselves? So you need to put other security fences in place, right? And that's where some of these other things come in. Using conditional access, monitoring, all the SaaS applications. These are important steps to take on behalf of your customers.
All right. And then with the growing adoption of SaaS applications and the rising number of guest user accounts, how can MSPs ensure their clients maintain proper access control and prevent unauthorized data sharing?
Access control and data sharing. So the data sharing piece, right, is monitoring the file shares that are happening. You can do that through SaaS Alerts. I'm not aware of other applications that can. I'm sure there are. So first of all, from an education perspective, it starts with the end users, again, not setting up anonymous file shares and setting end dates, and then being able to monitor those, right? And when you see the unusual behavior, boom, you can lock an account. Like, that is the best way to basically put restrictions and protections around the risky file sharing.
So with the trend of hackers using IP address localization to bypass foreign login flags, how can MSPs adapt their monitoring and alerting strategies to effectively detect and respond to these threats?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done is that we've started correlating device data with the SaaS account data. How we do that is we monitor the RMMs.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, you and I may have talked about this before. We have something called Unify. And essentially what Unify does is that, let's just say you're on VSA or on Automate or Data RMN, Synchro, you pick the RMM, Ninja. What we're doing is we're reading the device side information specific to that user, and then we're correlating it with the account information. So someone might be logging into an account from a location that could be familiar to you as the MSP that would normally not throw off a flag, right? If there's a business in Texas, let's just say it's Dallas, someone's logging in from Dallas. So there's a threat actor that's logging into a 365 account from Dallas. But because we're now correlating that with the device side data through the RMM, we know that it's not Steve's machine. So in that situation, what I would do is anytime you're seeing a user log into an account on a machine that you don't recognize, flag it, lock it, ask questions later. Call the customer, say, hey, look, we just locked this account. This is why we locked it. We saw someone coming from Dallas. Maybe we saw some additional information coming from this account as well. We saw an email forwarding rule set up, right? We saw a number of data points that led to the lock. Are you using your own machine today? Are you logging into your 365 account from a different machine? Because we saw this as very unusual behavior. We want to make sure that it's you. I don't care who the customer is. If they know that you have that level of insight into their environment, they're not going to fault you if for some reason that ended up being a false positive. Because you're acting on information that is certainly unusual. And that would be a customer that, if I'm an MSP, that they were yell at me for that, I'd be like, look, we're protecting you. Mm-hmm. Everything we can right now to protect you. If you don't think this is a level of protection that you deserve, then you should probably look for another MSP.
That's a really fair point. Keeping my CEO hat on, how can MSPs justify the investment in SaaS security solutions like SaaS Alerts to their clients? What metrics can they use to demonstrate the value of these tools in reducing risk and improving overall security?
So, great question. I will first of all take this report. You can download this report from our site. We give it to anyone that asks for it. So, first step is education. Educating them on why we're doing this, right? And why it's important. Then I would highlight things like the fact that Microsoft has changed their own terms of use. I say this a lot, but people still don't know. A lot of people don't know that this happened. About a year and a half ago, Microsoft changed their terms of use. They used to say that if someone gains unlawful access to a tenant, we, Microsoft, cannot be held liable, which is fair because they can't necessarily control end user security. But now they've taken it a step further and said, however, if someone gains unlawful access to your tenant, you can be held responsible.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I feel like it was already implied before.
It wasn't really implied. They just were saying, look, we can't be held responsible for this. But now they're saying, look, now the onus is on you, the customer of the MSP. So when end user customers know that, and Microsoft has gone to that legal step, it helps change the conversation, the narrative around why this is so important. Because they're acknowledging that, like Microsoft is acknowledging that it doesn't matter how well they protect the application itself. There's nothing we can do about end user security. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about end user security inside the tenant. So that is something that you could definitely show. And then, look, whether this individual asking this question or not is on SaaS Alerts, I can tell you that there's a lot of our partners that have had a lot of success stories. And you can use those success stories with your newer existing customers to say, look, this is what we just caught. This is how we caught it. And this is why we need to do it for you.
Okay. Let's switch over to the systems engineer hat. So with the growing adoption of SaaS applications and the increasing number of SaaS to SaaS app integrations through OAuth, how can system engineers effectively monitor and secure these connections to prevent potential exploitation by hackers? And obviously, I know that your first answer would be employ SaaS alerts. So let's skip that one since we already know that's the answer.
Yeah. So basically, they're asking about how to protect the login or how to protect identities to log in to SaaS applications. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, with so there's an increasing number of SaaS to SaaS app integrations through OAuth.
Yep.
How can system engineers effectively monitor and secure these connections to prevent potential exploitation?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one because so many people now are just taking the easy way out and they're saying, look, I'm an end user. I've got 30 applications where it might be. I'm just going to use Microsoft OAuth. And I'm going to leverage my 365 account, my Google account to get into everything.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. I think companies like Okta and Duo do a pretty good job on that side, and you can use a product like that to basically become the entry point for all applications. There's companies like Better Cloud out there. These are more enterprise level tools. So I don't know what your customers' appetite will be for spending more money around it. One of the things that we definitely see is when someone is using their 365 account to log into a foreign application. And I don't want to talk about what I would do in SaaS Alerts, but I think generally speaking, those are ideas that I would have off the top of my head. Chip Buck, or co-founder CTO, I'm sure would have a much better answer to this. But I'm not really a systems engineer, so I can't put on that hat.
All good. Well, let's put on our sales guy's hat.
That's one I'm much more familiar with.
Yeah. So what common objections or concerns have you found MSPs, clients, and prospects raise when considering investing in SaaS security solutions? And how can salespeople effectively address these objections?
This is all about positioning and messaging. We have about 1,000 MSPs now. And I can tell you about 70 of them, 70 plus at this point, have used something that we call the coverage extension notification. And this is a simple communication that goes out to all your customers. And what it does is basically says, look, the threat landscape has changed. SaaS applications, and specifically 365, number one threat vector. We need to do everything we can to better protect you around this threat vector. So we're going to give you an enhanced level of protection in the form of SaaS security monitoring and remediation. We're trying to keep our costs as low as possible. It's only $3 per user per month. If you do not want this solution, please opt out here. I can tell you from 70 plus MSPs that have done it, the opt-out rate is only 5%. So on the flip side of it, I can tell you that people that go one-to-one and try to explain the SaaS security monitoring and why it's important to the customer, they basically the take rate on that is much lower. Because ultimately what they respond to is, you need to have this. If you don't take it, you're basically signing a waiver saying that you understand your risk.
Mm-hmm.
Until you go to that length, they just look at it as one more thing you're trying to sell them and make money on, and they don't truly understand the risk that they're at, the risk that they have and own. So I talk to MSPs all the time about go-to-market, and the ones that are going one by one to all of their customers and prospects, I say, you're doing it the hard way. There's a much easier way to do this, and I can give you countless examples. To the point, Steve, where we actually guarantee it. We know it's so successful, we guarantee it. We call it the MRR guarantee. Let's just say, Steve, you've got 2,000 users that you support. What we'll say is that if you send this out to all of your customers, if we don't increase your monthly recurring revenue by $3,000 a month in 60 days, we'll pay you $1,000.
That's impressive.
That's how much we believe in this messaging, and how much we believe in the messaging in concert with the product.
And to clarify, what I just heard is we're guaranteeing, for lack of a better term, that 50% of your user base will adopt SaaS Alerts.
Yes, by using the covered extension notification methodology. So we know, based on experience, that number is going to be a lot higher, because the opt-out rate is only 5%. But we're willing to at least guarantee the 50%. And if you're using the $3 average, which is the average right now, most MSPs are charging their end customer. We've got some as high as 9 and some as low as 1, but the average is squarely at 3. So if you use that number, that's what we're going to guarantee.
Okay.
So that's the best go-to-market lever that you have right now when doing this.
Now, I got to say, I love reports like this because they're showing factual data. However, I despise reports like this when they are used in a sales setting, because it feels like FUD.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that FUD is fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yep.
And I feel like this is only the fear, right? There's no uncertainty. We are certain that we've seen these facts using SaaS Alert.
Right.
There's no doubt that these facts are true. So it's only the fear part of the FUD. But I personally hate fear-based selling. So at the same time, you need some type of motivator. If you get rid of FUD, what's your motivator? What's the thing that's going to push the end user or the customer across the line to get them to buy? Mm-hmm. So what do you tell MSPs who want to have some type of and I can't think of the right term for it, but they want to have some type of motivator, but they don't want to sell. They don't necessarily want to use your report and sell based on fear.
Yeah. Well, I would say our report is educational.
Sure.
As you said, this is pure fact. There's no opinion here outside of what we think the detection and response steps should be. Obviously, we have what we think are best practices. People might disagree, but the data coming from our platform that we aggregate and anonymize, you can't dispute that. That's real. 35% of people are using MFA. Well, we know within our partner customer base where threats are coming from. We know what the file sharing risk is. Like, that's education. And instead of FUD, I would say FOMO, fear of missing out. Fear of missing out on a solution that can better protect my business and mitigate my risk. I think instead of FUD, what people need to start thinking about is risk management on behalf of their customer. Like, we know where the risk is. We know it's right now, it's business email compromise, it's token hijacking, it's phishing as a service. Like, we know where the threats are coming from. And we know how lucrative for the bad guys to do it, which is why they're not going to give it up anytime soon. So if we know that, how can we mitigate your risk as a business? And that's what we're trying to do. If you don't want to do that, if you're fine accepting that level of risk for your own business, and if you were to get compromised, you're okay with loss of revenue, you're okay with reputation issues, then fine. We don't have to do it. But we can tell you this, as your MSP, you're going to sign the waiver saying that you don't want it, just so we all know we had this conversation. We educated you on what the risk is, and you decided that you didn't want to take precautions. That is a very reasonable stance from my perspective. That's like saying, look, you've got a friend that goes out drinking one night, and they're driving, and you say, dude, you've had too much to drink, you shouldn't drive. They're, no, I know, no, yeah, I'm not that bad. No, you've had too many, you shouldn't do it. Well, no, and they keep pushing back. You know, I've been in these situations where I've had friends that are pushing back like this, and be like, okay, you know that you could either, get pulled over and get a DWI, which is going to mess things up. You could actually take someone else's life or your own life in this situation. Are you comfortable with taking that risk? Now, I know this isn't apples to apples and necessarily life or death, but when someone decides you're going to get behind the wheel after they've had too much to drink, most people understand what that risk is. Maybe they're not thinking it through clearly at that point in time, but there's risk. And as a friend, you need to point out what those risks are. As an MSP, you need to point out what the risk is to your customer and what it could mean for them if they're compromised.
Very good. Hey guys, if you like what you heard today, let me rephrase that. It's not whether you like it or not. You probably don't like it because you saw some facts that were troubling, like 63 or whatever the percent was for non-adoption rate for MFA. If you liked Jim's presentation though, and you like what you're seeing when it comes to visibility into cybersecurity, check out SaaS Alerts. You can go to SaaSAlerts.com, SaaS Alerts.com. Is there like a trial or anything that people can sign up for?
Yeah, definitely. So if people go to our website, thank you for mentioning it, you can either sign up for a trial, you can sign up for a demo. I always recommend people signing up for a demo first so they can understand, what the application does and how it works. And then you automatically get, when you sign up for a demo, you automatically get a 14-day free trial if you want one.
Perfect. So yeah, go to the website. I got it up on the bottom of the screen now. Sign up, check it out. It is a really powerful platform. In fact, just a couple months ago or a few months ago now, Jim, you were on, and you guys did a fantastic demo of SaaS Alerts. Actually, no, it wasn't you. It was one of your guys came on
Yeah.
and we did a demo of SaaS Alerts. And I got to say, I was even blown away at some of the things because you just keep innovating. I remember I got a demo of it like a year or two ago, and so much has changed. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next. I'm really impressed by your product.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that. And we definitely work hard. Innovation is a core value at SaaS Alerts. So appreciate you saying that. And yeah, we have a lot of great plans for the rest of the year.
Wonderful. Well, hey, everyone, thanks so much for watching. We will catch you at the next one. I've got Monger coming on Friday. So check that out for contracts as a service. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Steve.